Hi, I'm Grudy Cullen, the CapeCod.com News Center, and I'm joined today by a special guest from the New England Aquarium. We're going to chat a little bit more about whale protections. Do you mind just introducing yourself for our listeners?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Grady. My name is Hansen Johnson. I'm at the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life at the New England Aquarium. Yeah, and I'm on a team that works with right whales, and I'm happy to talk more about this exciting development.
All right, awesome. Yeah, as you've already alluded to, so recently NOAA has been starting to federal regulators. Excuse me, we've been seeing a little bit more activity from whales as of late in the northern hemisphere in general, but specifically around the Cape and Islands region. And they've been considering more regulations, more speed restrictions, and right now a lot of them are voluntary. But there's been some developments in terms of technology. Now they can just reach out and basically send text messages to people who might be kind of violating certain restriction zones. Do you mind just elaborating a little bit more for us and what the general reaction has been from you guys at Anderson Cabot?
Sure, yeah. Well, as you know, North Atlantic right whales are critically endangered. There's less than 350, and one of the really challenging issues that they're facing is increased mortality and injury due to vessel strike. And so, one of the mitigation methods is to try to slow ships down so that there's less of a risk of injury. And we're pretty good at, we have a lot of systems in place for detecting right whales. We're doing pretty well at gathering those detection, different types of detection information using things like the Whale Alert app or Whale Map, which I encourage everyone to go check out, by the way. But one of the challenges is distributing that information to mariners. And this recent development is a really promising step in that direction.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting. So, how long have you been involved essentially in this research? Have you been kind of able to see like the rise and fall, unfortunately, of this very endangered species?
Yeah, I started studying right whales in about 2015. Though many members of my team have been studying them since the early 80s.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we've seen uh, sort of a lot of different challenges and some things, some encouraging patterns and some discouraging ones. And yeah, I mean, of late, there's been a lot more challenges, unfortunately.
Yeah, I kind of a loaded question, I suppose, because as well, it's like, oh
Yeah.
well, the beginning of the end for whales, I suppose, is back in the 1800s when we were beginning to whale them out. So probably you're not that
Yeah.
old. I can't really imagine you're from the
No.
whaling days. But yeah, as of late, we've been seeing so much more in like commerce and stuff, and just so many vessel strikes that have been involved, and we've been seeing more entanglements. Now, this seems to be kind of more targeting the specifically the vessel strike issue. But is this also kind of an opportunity to highlight like what are some other challenges, I guess, for our listeners who might not be familiar? I would be surprised at this point. We do so many interviews based around the whales. But what I mean, we've also been seeing, of course, the entanglements. Can you comment there?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think underlying all of these issues is, human-induced climate change contributing to shifts in right whale distribution and making that distribution less predictable than it has been in previous years, and bringing right whales into contact with unmitigated risks from um, primarily ship strike and fishing gear entanglement. And so we've been talking about speed restrictions as a way to mitigate mortality from vessel strike. And there's a lot of developments around mitigating entanglement risks, especially with the development of ropeless or on-demand fishing gear, and a number of other different mechanisms there. So yeah, there's efforts being made to address both of those major risk areas.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very interesting one that we've been seeing with the restriction zones. A lot of questions that I immediately had was, how do you enforce any of this? I mean, a lot of them are voluntary, and then even in the places where it is required, I mean, there is a little bit more involved because a lot of vessels are equipped with like GPS devices, so a lot of them you can actually track the various routes that a lot of vessels are taking. But do you think this is just kind of a little bit of this most recent step is kind of a reminder from regulators being like, hey, we're watching essentially in some regards. Like it's the warning, but it's also to kind of just highlight. Do you think that just is monitoring is kind of the biggest obstacle that we're facing now? Just how many eyes can we get out there, and how do you actually enforce any of this?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak specifically to the enforcement
Sure.
piece. but I can say that, with regards specifically to using, this new technology to both monitor, or not actually taking advantage of an existing and widely used technology to both monitor, um, vessels and also distribute information to them is really fantastic. And that technology, I think you alluded to, but that's the, automatic identification system, or AIS, which is a ship-to-ship communication system, primarily, developed for marine safety, but can also be used to, monitor vessels as they move around, and also distribute information to them. And so that's what this sort of the text message idea, that you've alluded to, and what has been done here is, researchers and engineers have used that AIS system to actually transmit, information to vessels in, a right whale slow zone.
Mhm. Now I guess I'll just kinda jump right to it. Do you think it's enough? Do you think that from, the standpoint of conservation, is this gonna be just the tip of the iceberg? Do we need more? Is this satisfactory? What are your kind of, your feelings in terms of what you'd like to see going forward?
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really exciting development. I mean, but it's also very early days. I think this, I'm not sure exactly how many messages have been sent, but I think it's, less than 100. And as was published already, and as you alluded to, enforcement is voluntary. I guess the measures are voluntary,
Mm,
um, or their, enforcement is not, particularly strict. And so what these messages are doing is reminding, mariners that they're in these areas and potentially violating these, speed, restrictions. And I do think that's a really important step, but it's a first step. And I think that, there's a lot more work to be done to sort of scale up this approach to the whole East Coast. And just be raising awareness first and foremost, because no one wants to be, harming these animals. I think that much is clear. Yeah.
mhm. Now we are kinda getting into it's the season for them. Essentially, they come up, migrate every year. We are kind of in the springtime now. Do you mind giving us a little bit of a update of terms of what research you guys have been conducting as of late? Maybe what you're excited about for this season?
Sure. So our team specifically is going to be doing a little bit of, a trial run of some different, monitoring techniques in Cape Cod Bay. That's an area where right whales, congregate pretty reliably each spring, in large numbers. And then our team is also going to be working with a number of collaborators in the southern Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada, to also be collecting information on the, roughly a third of the population that tends to go back there every year. So yeah, we're excited to get on the water, and, we see ourselves as collecting a lot of the, monitoring data that's really important to understand how these different, um, uh, sort of risk mitigation methods whether or not they're being effective.
Mm. Yeah, so it's interesting. You guys are kind of be the final judge in some regards. You think you're going to be getting together some papers and getting back to NOAA maybe by the end of the year in terms of like, hey, yeah, it didn't work, or like we've been seeing just as many vessel strikes. How will you judge that? Is it actually just going to be based on we're going to count the vessel strikes, and if it's down over the previous year, then great job. Otherwise, let's get back to the drawing
Hmm.
board.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. And I should say we're one of many, many different organizations that are conducting these kinds of surveys, and doing this kind of work. Um, but it's very difficult to measure, especially ship strikes, because we only recover a very small, portion of the animals that are, unfortunately killed. And so, it is a difficult thing to measure, but by conducting really, detailed surveys and collecting, especially, photographs of individuals, we know every individual in the population, and we can track them over time and use a number of different statistical approaches, and different analysis techniques to sort of assess, the relative contribution of entanglement and ship strike, and basically just how that's affecting the trajectory of the population.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's kind of it's a little somber to kind of be like, oh, it's there's so few that it's actually very reasonable to remember them all, even on a personal level. And keeping track of them is honestly not so difficult. There's less whales than there are days in the year now, so it's a bit sad. Recently as well, we had the right whale juvenile that had washed up on the islands as of late. I believe that we're starting to get data a little bit back from the necropsy. They were heavily entangled, but like in light of that news, do you think that that kind of just adds in with these regulations, kind of like the importance of keeping an eye out for these critically endangered creatures?
Absolutely. I think every whale that ends up on the beach is a tragedy and a wake-up call, and it's not something that I think anyone wants to see happen as regularly as it's happening, you know. And so certainly for us, like um, it's sad, but it's also really motivating to continue to try to find solutions that make a meaningful impact for the species.
Mhm. All right, awesome. So as well, we're about coming to a close. It's about all the time that we have. But is there anything else you wanted to highlight about what you guys are doing with the research, or other things that you just wanted to make people aware of as we're moving into the summer season and animals and humans will be interacting a lot more in general? But just like yeah, just general closing comments for our listeners.
Yeah, in general, I think I would encourage people to, if you're on the water, and you happen to see a right whale, first and foremost, don't approach. They really do need their space. And then second, I would really encourage you to report that. And you can do that. I would encourage you to do that with the Whale Alert app. And then if anyone is interested in following along with where research groups have been looking for right whales or where they've found right whales, I'd encourage you to go to either the Whale Alert app or to whalemap.org for more information.
Sure. Actually, Henson, I lied.
Yeah.
I have more questions for you. Tell me,
Okay.
I forgot about the app, actually. Can you elaborate a little bit more on
Sure.
that? Is it all citizen scientists, or is this kind of a combination? Yeah, we have the Sharktivity app, and it's my new favorite thing. It's my latest obsession every summer. So if there's a whale equivalent, I have to know more. So can you give us the details?
Absolutely, yeah. So the Whale Alert app is a really fantastic development to and to make this information available more broadly. And also, I think critically, it allows people to contribute sightings information as sort of a crowdsourcing tool. The other system that I alluded to, whalemap.org, is one that I developed and maintain with our team, and that primarily pulls in information from all the different survey groups and makes that available in an online display with a little bit more interactivity. And the two systems share data back and forth, so they should be pretty consistent. But the idea is really to make this information available, transparent, and hopefully allow people to follow along and see what's going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. As well, I posed this question to IFAW, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, and I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask pretty much every scientist that I come across now, especially in the marine space, is how is the role of just your basic citizen nowadays? We have digital internet has really kind of opened up the space, and not everybody has the same scientific training, but that crowdsourcing that you just mentioned, like, has that been a game changer for you guys in the research? Excuse me, researching. I want to say research industry, but that's not really quite the point. Just research in general, how does that play in?
I think it's a little bit difficult with right whales because they in with the exception of a few special areas like Cape Cod Bay, they tend to be less accessible. And so it's much easier for research teams in airplanes and offshore capable research vessels to be doing those kinds of surveys. Um, but certainly, in those special places, and then if people, encounter, unfortunately, if there's like a carcass that's encountered on the beach or, something like that, really just the more people that are aware of the situation, the better. And that awareness and education, I think, is really, really important. Yeah, can't really overstate it.
Sure, I understand. It is good to know though as well. I guess for our citizen aviators out there who want to help out with
Sure, of
spotting, then by
course.
all means, call up New England
Yeah.
Aquarium. We'll get you hooked up. All right, but that is about it, Hanson. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Grady.
I'm Grady Collane, and this has been a conversation with Hansen Johnson from New England Aquarium. Thank you for listening to our podcast, our Sunday Journal segment.